Hey guys, so about 5-6 days ago I did a video where I talked about how this month and time frame, basically November and December, marks 10 years since the Mecha Sally arc was first introduced to us. And I basically said it best in the title there. You know, the Mecha Sally arc was basically, as I put it, you know, it was a joke. It was a joke when it was all said and done. You know, it was a joke, period. I mean, I did give credit where credit was due. The planning was good. The planning for it was good. You know, the outline and everything was good. The potential of it sounded good, you know, on paper and in the ears of the fans and all that. But the execution killed it. The execution killed it in a way that, you know, basically turned it into a joke, you know, when it was all said and done. But there are those that do credit Ian Flynn for at least attempting to do something on a massive scale, you know, do something that it was kind of game-changing in the current story arc of the Freedom Fighters, you know, as far as the JoshSonic comic was concerned. But we all know that his original plans, like I said, went up in smoke. Not just because, you know, the execution, you know, killed it in a negative way, turning it into a joke, but also the fact that he didn't, as I mentioned in the video, didn't plan, you know, or didn't do a backup plan, I should say, for some, you know, for any kind of interruptions. In this case, the behind-the-scenes legal issues. So what happened? Instead of trying to find a way to continue it, you know, in a sense that wouldn't cause legal situations, they decided to abruptly end it by having a second Genesis wave come into being, you know, at the end of 247, which led us into the first Mega Man Sonic crossover. And then after that, we got the post-soft retcon and reboot. Now, if I was to give Ian and his crew any credit, I would say that what they did with the post-soft retcon and reboot, I thought was good. I thought they did the best they could by picking up the scraps that was left behind and working on it and working, you know, to the best of their abilities to sculpt and mold us, you know, something that we can enjoy, even if it wasn't what we intended. You know, or what, you know, they intended, not we, but even if it wasn't what they intended originally in the first place, or what we originally intended to be reading or viewing as subscribers. That's what I was trying to say. However, one reader, one fan, JoshSonic 2021 on Twitter, has come somewhat to Ian's defense. Now, he has pointed out some things about Ian that, you know, could have been better, done better and all that. But he's, you know, looking back on the arc 10 years later, you know, he's come to his defense, you know, in his own, you know, way, his own point of view and opinion, to point out that, you know, maybe things could have been different had things panned out in a way that would have been more suitable. Like basically, you know, people that were against the arc maybe wouldn't have gone against it had, you know, certain things happened. And this is what he had to say. These are 6 tweets that he did on his Twitter account yesterday. And this is what he had to say, and I quote. This is the first 4. This is what JoshSonic 2021 had to say. And I quote. You know, Ian Flynn deserves more credit for the Mecha Sally arc. He was really setting this up to be a gargantuan epic. All kinds of things were going on. Jeffrey's whole deal with Nagas, Freedom Fighters in the Darkest Hour. We even got a new secret Freedom Fighter group. Continuing on, and I quote, Knuckles was finally ready to come back for his people after spending a long time consumed with shame because of what he did as Irajak. The comic at this point was getting really intense and emotional. Ian was being really ambitious with how he built off the established world, which is kind of true. Which is true, you know. You know, this was being, you know, pinned to be a very big, epic storyline. And, you know, Ian was, obviously, through his storytelling, was showing how ambitious he was to make this, you know, something that people would talk about for years to come. Although I don't think, I should say, he expected people to talk about it, you know, in a way that they are now, if you catch my drift. But continuing on, and I quote, This makes the fact that the arc was technically left unfinished all the more disheartening. If there's anything I'd consider to be Ian Flynn's magnum opus of the Sonic comics, this would be it. And that is true. I mean, even I pointed it out that Ian Flynn, obviously wanted to have something that would, have people remember him by for his time on the comics, just like Ken Penders and his staff did, had with Endgame. Ian Flynn decided he wanted to take it, obviously, another, step forward to another level by, doing the Mecha Sally, Death Egg Mark II, World Tour II arc that he was attempting to do. Now, he does compliment the artwork. He says he loves the art direction of the story arc by Stephen Butler, Ben Bates, and Tracy Yardlin, saying they were all on the A game, along with Terry Austin as inker and Matt Herms as colorist, which I do agree. They were, all good. If there's any positiveness to come out of the arc, was the, out of the story arc, was the artwork, from issue to issue. I will give him that. But he is right. Ian Flynn was very ambitious. Ambitious. Easy for me to say. When it came to this arc and making it, a huge, gargantuan, epic storyline of a magnum opus that, like I said, people would remember him for long after he was off the comics. Whether it was Archie or IDW. However, as I mentioned, I don't think he realized people would, or was planning, I should say, not realized, but was planning on people remembering it in a different kind of way. Now, that's what he had to say, and that's what he had to say here. That being JoshSonic 2021. Now, the second tweets he put out were like this, and I quote. These are the second two he put out to coincide with it, the first four. This is what he said, and I quote. Would people be more kind to this arc if we actually got to see it finished the way it was supposed to, with all the freedom fighters eventually bouncing back? In the words of Ian, he only got to the breaking point, making him look like a hateful madman. And what he's getting at there is Ian Flynn obviously was getting ready to take us to that next level, to where obviously Sally was going to get her free will back, potentially be de-roboticized, and then they were going to start, the building blocks for the freedom fighters coming back stronger than ever, and thus in the storyline showing that no matter what Eggman does, he can't beat them, he can't keep them down. However, because of the crossover happening at the end of 247 and all that with Mega Man, which was an excuse obviously not just by Archie Comics, and Ian Flynn, mostly Archie Comics, to get around, and Sega to an extent, to get around the whole legal situation with Ken Penders, but it was also basically something that Archie, Sega, and Capcom wanted to see happen, since Archie Comics, did have the license to distribute comics for both Sonic and Mega Man. Now, continuing on, and I quote what he said, finishing off here, and I quote. We never got to see the turning point. The story was cut off at the darkest hour, and the fact that endangered species had to be rewritten the way it was cranked the depression level up to 11. And what he's talking about there is, as I mentioned in the original video, Julie Sue was meant to be part of the endangered species arc, but because of the legal issues and everything, they had to rewrite it to where this character called Thrash, the Tasmanian Devil, used a warp ring to send all the echidnas that Ken Penders had created, Julie Sue, Linda, all of them, into limbo, into the zone of silence with no escape. So that was basically Archie's way and Ian Flynn's way of getting around that loophole, if you know what I mean. Now, continuing on, he had one last thing to say, and I quote, or do people just hate the Mecha Sally arc, simply because of the fact that these characters aren't at the forefront for once? I love the Classic Freedom Fighter group just as much as the rest of us, but having a saga focusing on characters other than them isn't the end of the world. And that is true. You sometimes have to change things up a little bit, to keep interest in a product and all that. But here's the thing though, Josh, and I say this with all due respect. You have a right to your opinion. Everybody does. I have a right to my opinion. There's no doubt about that. And like I said, there are some positives. There are some positives to look at. I mean, the fact that the planning for it. The outline planning for the story was obviously done very well. The potential of the story long term, from beginning to end, sounded good on paper, or looked good on paper, and sounded good to the ears of the fans. But the execution, pretty much killed it in a negative way, because even though everything else sounded good, the planning, the outline planning, the potential, and all that. It's the fact that you had the rinse and repeat factor, being a constant thing, issue after issue. I mean, only once in a while would Ian Flynn change it up to make things more intriguing and more interesting, even with it, being, basically, even with it being kind of thrown into Sonic Universe as well, or being, continued in Sonic Universe. The fact is, long story short, it's the fact that, the execution just didn't come out well. And, Ian Flynn not being able to finish it, yeah, it may have made him look bad in the long run, because, he didn't properly end the issue or end the story arc the way he was hoping to. But from what I can recall, again, and I mentioned this in the other video, Ben Bates said that there was a projection to go all the way up to issue 300. And for a lot of us, hearing that, as being one of the initial original ideas to go forward with, when it came to concluding this arc, not a lot of us, and this is the truth, not a lot of us, probably more than I can even count, wanted to wait that long. It's like, okay, you're going to give her back her free will, maybe de-roboticize her around 250, like JoshSonic Online did. But, that's one thing. That's one thing, if you will. But then where do you go from there? Where do you go from there is the question. How do you, take the next 50 issues to get us to that conclusion, that ultimate conclusion? And I don't think a lot of us, especially nowadays, even back then, had the patience to wait that long. I don't think any of us want to wait up until the 300th issue. I mean, when did the official ending of the partnership between both Archie and Sega end? When did that end? Well, around 2017, right? 2018, 2017? Do you think a lot of us want to wait, up until this year, essentially, or last year, essentially, for this thing to end? I don't think so. I don't think so. Because, because here's the thing. Straight out. Here's the thing. It's one thing for a comic book company to do a year-long, do a year-long or 2-year-long story arc because they want to freshen things up with their characters. They want to freshen things up with the stories and stuff like that. DC and Marvel and Image and IDW and Dark Horse and all of them, they've been known to do that. There's no doubt. Wildstorm, they've been known to do that. There's no doubt about it. Top Cow's been known to do that. All, major to minor independent companies have been known to do that. But here's the thing. Like I said, they've only would go as far as maybe a year, maybe 2 years. They wouldn't attempt to plan and drag it out for a whole decade just because their initial thought was, I'm going to create a magnum opus. I can get you an epic that will have people remember me for years to come. No. If you're going to do something like that, then okay, that's fine. But don't drag it out for, almost a decade, decades worth of story. Don't do that. I mean, the one thing that made the Iron Dominion very tolerable in the eyes of folks, even when you had it spin off or continue in the books of Sonic Universe, what made the Iron Dominion arc, very tolerable, is overall, for 16 issues in total between both books, it was a year. It was a 1-year run. That's it. It was a 1-year run. That was it. There was nothing, nothing out there to drag it, out for much longer. There was nothing more that would, drag it for more years to come. All it was 1 year, and that was it. Nothing more. Let's take a look at, let's take a look at the Suppression Squad. You know, or not the suppression squad, but the suppression squad, the anti-freedom fighters, if you will, when they came and invaded Mobius to try to take over Freedom HQ. That lasted for what, 6 to 7, 8 issues? And that was fine. It wasn't dragged out for any time longer. And when they did a follow-up, they gave it its own 4-part story arc in Sonic Universe. You know, in the story arc Lockdown. So they didn't drag it out for years to come. And by going with these time restraints, if you will, these time constraints, you know, made the stories more enjoyable. They made them more tolerable. No matter how messed up or how convoluted they might get, they were more, you know, tolerable in the end. So, for fans like me to hear from someone like Ben Bates, who was working closely with Ian, that one of the original plans, if not the original plan, was to go to 300, almost do a decade's worth of story? No, that don't work right. That don't work right. You know, it's like, you know, it's like you're trying to stroke your own ego in doing something like that. You're trying to basically mount yourself higher than what people envision you really as. It's like you're trying to make yourself the greatest of the greats, and that doesn't work. That doesn't work. Like I said, when some of these major, you know, companies do these kind of arcs, some of the minor or independent companies do these kind of arcs, you know, they do them, and sometimes the longest they will go is maybe 2 years, and that's it. After 2 years, they're done. They are done. I mean, when DC did the whole countdown deal, and they did the countdown of 50, 49, 48, 47, and all that, you know, they did those, you know, when you think about it, that's like what? The countdown thing was what? About, let's see, 50 issues? So you're looking at what? 4 years of story, but the way they did it is they compressed it down to 2, if not a year and a half worth of story by releasing an issue week after week after week. Because they knew people wouldn't have the patience to wait 4 years just for the countdown prelude to countdown to end. They wouldn't have the patience. They wouldn't. And that was a smart move by DC. So for someone like Ben Bates to come out and tell us that one of the original, if not the original plan, you know, from a continuity storyline standpoint, issue standpoint, you know, was to go all the way to 300, do a decade's worth of story. No, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. So look, again, I get where you're coming from. I understand where you're coming from, that, you know, would there have been less headaches had he been allowed to finish this story arc? Maybe. Maybe there would be less headaches, you know, if he had been allowed to finish it. But in my opinion, in my personal opinion, you know, there would have been less headaches if he had just, you know, finished it with 250. And then maybe if he wanted to continue it for, oh, I don't know, another 5, 6 issues, then fine. Or another 10 issues, fine. Then go with that. If you want to do it for another 5 to 10 issues, fine. Or maybe you want to use Universe as a way to basically show us how Bunny's going to come back, like what Sonic Online is doing right now, then that's fine too. The point is, the point is, you know, Ian Flynn, you know, again, I agree with you. I give him credit for wanting to do something this ambitious, you know, for wanting to do something this huge to have himself remembered by. But again, sometimes less is better. Less is better. The stories that he did with, like I said, the Suppression Squad, you know, the anti-freedom fighters invading, you know, Freedom HQ for 6 to 8 issues. Good. Tolerable. Not a problem. People enjoyed it because it was not that long. The Iron Dominion arc went for about a year, including the 4-part Journey to the East in Sonic Universe. Guess what? People enjoyed it because it wasn't that long and it didn't drag. It wasn't rinse and repeat either. And it didn't go on for years after years after years. You know, it didn't attempt to do that. It settled on a time frame that it was going to start and begin with, and that was it. Here, had things gone the way that Ian was originally envisioning, who knows how long we would be going with it. And honestly, I don't think anybody wanted to wait until, 2018-19 to finish the whole thing up? Almost a decade's worth? I don't think anybody wanted to wait that long. I think people were done with it the moment, there was rinse and repeat. And that's the fact. That is an absolute fact. That people were done with this arc the moment, Ian Flynn started to do rinse and repeat. Now, I'll acknowledge there were some silver linings, like the Secret Freedom Fighters, Team Freedom, and all that, because that did kind of change things up, throughout several issues, including Sonic Universe. I'll give him that. Those were some silver linings, but still, those silver linings were overshadowed by the negative rinse and repeat that turned this into a joke. And the fact that he wasn't properly planning, or properly, what's the word I'm looking for? Ian Flynn didn't properly plan out a backup plan just in case the plan that was outlined and sounded good and potential wise and everything on paper and into the ears of the fans, it all fell apart because one of the main things he didn't do was plan for something that might interrupt it. The fact that you had Sega mandate that, we want an issue of the main comic to focus on the Sonic and All-Stars racing deal. Or we want a page of Universe to focus on the Olympics. It's like, seriously? You're interrupting a story like this that people want to get done and, finished and done with? They want to see get finished and done with because they're getting tired and bored of the rinse and repeat cycle of it? You want to interrupt it because you want to promote your games, or you want to promote a tie-in, you want to promote a tie-in with the Olympics. It's like, come on, you could have saved those for, backup stories. You could have saved those for, free comic book day. The point is, Josh. We all understand where you're coming from, and we respect your opinions. But the thing is, Ian Flynn needed to plan better. I'm not saying that the planning wasn't good. The outline planning for the story was great. The potential on paper and to the ears of the fan sounded great. No doubt about that. I'm not denying that. But the execution is what negatively killed it. And the other thing that affected it as well is he didn't plan for a backup. He didn't do a backup plan just in case something would happen. Like interruptions to promote a game or to promote a tie-in or anything like that. He didn't have anything on the back burner just in case something would happen. And to me, that is what hurt him the most. If he would have just had a backup plan, set and ready to go as far as the story was concerned, so he can try to continue and finish it the way he envisioned, maybe not totally the way he envisioned, but kind of close to it, instead of constantly still trying to go with his original plan, then I think, honestly, I think there would be less headaches. I think there would have been a less headache. I think the execution would have been a lot better, and it would have been a lot more tolerable. But because he didn't do that, basically the whole thing fell apart. And I think Ian Flynn knows that he could have done better. I think he knows and believes he could have done better, which is why when it came to the Metal Virus arc, like I said in the original video, the reason it went on for so long, to the point that even someone like Mega Beatman, who does reviews of the Sonic comics weekly or bi-weekly every month, was, in his own tone, even, sounded exhausted but elated that it was over. And the reason he sounded exhausted but elated that it was over is because it dragged on for too long. But the reason it dragged on for too long is because Ian Flynn was making up for the fact that he missed the opportunity for a magnum opus gargantuan epic story arc with the Mecha Sally Death Egg Mark II World Tour 2 arc that he was trying to complete and finish in the original Archie run. And as I said about the whole Sonic Unleashed deal, if you want to look at it that way, the whole Sonic Unleashed, Shadow Worlds, Panic in the Sky deal, yeah, it was one big story arc, but the difference was each part of that story arc felt like one chapter, felt like one self-contained chapter. Then when you were done with it, you could go to the next chapter and feel like you haven't missed anything. Even when they spun some of the stories off along with the characters into Sonic Universe, it felt like, those was, sub-chapters or sub-arcs that once they were done, you would feel like you haven't missed anything. Or when you would go back to the main story arc, it felt like nothing was being amiss, if you catch my drift. So to me, in all honesty, the execution, negatively killed it. It killed it in a negative level. But had it been done more properly, like had he not only had he planned it out the way he did, which looked good, obviously looked good, and the potential of the story looked good on paper and sounded good to the fans. Had he, kept that, momentum he had there, and then used it to create a backup plan, then I think the execution overall would have been good, because the backup plan would have still allowed him to probably finish the story arc, but maybe not in the way he was originally envisioned it. But had he, had that backup plan in case there were interruptions and things, I think, again, the execution would have been a lot better. That's just my opinion, Josh. That's just my opinion. But again, I get where you're coming from. Would there have been less headaches? Probably, if he'd been able to finish it, in the way he envisioned, or maybe in a backup kind of way, a little different than what he had envisioned. Then yeah, I think there would have been less headaches and all that. I really do. But the thing is, if you're going to plan something like this, Josh, in the end, what you need to do, and I know I sound like a broken record here, what you need to do is you need to not only have an original plan set up with the potential of it, with the potential on paper, looking good and sounding good to maybe the eyes, to the eyes and the ears of the fans, but you also need to always have a backup plan when it comes to something like this, so that if anything does happen, you could take any elements of that backup plan and apply it to the story so that you don't lose anything. You don't lose anything, period. So to me, I get where you're coming from. I respect your opinion. But in my opinion and other people's opinions, had he planned out a lot better, not saying, again, I know I sound like a broken record, not saying that the planning the outline planning for the story wasn't good. It was. You could see that. I'm not saying that the potential of the story didn't, look good on paper or sound good to the ears of the fans. It did. And it looked like it was going to, execute that well. But in the end, when we started to see the rinse and repeat, that's when it started to fall apart. That's when it started to fall apart and basically lose interest in the eyes of a lot of the fans. A lot of the fans started to go away from it because it was like, because then the only question wasn't what's going to happen next, was the question they were starting to ask was, when is it going to end? And guess what? That was a question a lot of fans were asking about the Metal Virus arc, was when is it going to end? Because they never knew when it was going to end. Because it kept going and going and dragging on. Rinse and repeat. But like I said, Ian Flynn was using the Metal Virus arc, in my opinion, to make up for the fact that he couldn't do the Gigantuan epic arc that he wanted to do with the Mecha Sally World Tour 2 Death Egg Mark II arc. And that's the truth, in my opinion, from what I can tell, from what I can see. But yeah, I believe if he would have had a backup plan, the execution probably would have been a little bit better, because he could have taken elements of that backup plan, put them into the story so that he wouldn't lose much story at all and still be able to finish it. But honestly though, I think if he was able to do that, I would have just finished it after 250. I would have done a Sonic Universe thing like what Online's doing right now, focusing on Bunny, bringing her back, and then coincide her return to Knothole, a new Mobotropolis, along with Sally's return, and then maybe Antron coming out of his coma, and then there you go. You could start anew, fresh and everything for the Freedom Fighters, probably around 251 or 253, if you will, go in the original, pre-soft reboot continuity, in my opinion. But I just wanted to come on here and do this reply to you, Josh, as well as, to let you guys know what, JoshSonic 2021 had to say. What do you guys think overall? What do you think about what he had to say here? Comment below, live chat during the premiere, like the video, check out the Teespring store, especially now that the holidays are coming up, for any gift ideas you might want to get or look into. Also check me out at BW Rose's discussions on all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. Also check me out at BW Roses on VENMO. Check me out at patreon.com/BWRoses for $1, $3 here to donate there. And check me out at Venmo if you want to help donate in that area as well. So until next time, guys, sorry this video went long and everything and sounded like I rambled, but I want to respond to Josh's video, Josh's opinion. I want to read off his thoughts to you, get your opinions on it, as well as reply back to him as well. But again, let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the live chat and in the comments, and I'm out.